Hello, everyone, and welcome back to our virtual Mishnah Berurah. We're holding Mishnah Berurah Chelik Gimel, and Mir Hashem, today we will be learning Daf Kuf Tzadik Hey Amud Aleph, second to last Amud in Chelik Gimel. Wow, Rabbi Sai, what an unbelievable accomplishment! Our learning today should be a schus for Achedu Beis Yisrael Hanasin Basara Bashivya Haimdim Be Bayam Be Bayabasha Hamakim Yerachem Alei Veitzim Mitzar Lervacha Me'afel La'ira Mishibel Lagula Hashta Bagalo of Isman Kariv and Emar Amen. Our learning should be a schus Refuah Shalemer from Shemer Ben Esther Fravel Yitzchak Ben Zion Ben Dusha Rivka Bashir Aleya Chavadasa Baserel Yeshua Levi Ben Ahuva Malka Chana. By the way, Rabbi say, I keep on saying this name, Yeshua Levi ben Ahuva Malkachana. Little Yeshua Levi is a little baby who, when he was very, very little, I think just a few weeks old, his mother Nebuch found him unresponsive and was able to resuscitate the baby and bring the baby in for immediate medical care. But since that time, the baby has really been in and out of the hospital. Now I believe the baby is in a rehabilitative center, but the baby is facing all sorts of uphill challenges. But I happen to know the great aunt. Aunt. I know the aunt very, very well, and she's a tremendous balas b'tachan, and they really have placed their faith in the Rabbeinu Shalom and the Roifei Neman, Baruch Atah Hashem, Roifei Chalbasa, or Mafli Lasois, Roifei Chaylei Amo Yisrael, and we mispal every day that little Yeshua Levi ben Ahuva Malkachana should have a complete Refuah Shalema, and his parents should see much nachas from him. He should be fully functional and lead a wonderful, good life. Chavadasa Baserel, I'm not sure I said that name yet, and Gila Shifra Bas Ilan Udel. They should all have a Refuah Shalema b'Seich Shar Chaylei Yisrael. Okay, so we're continuing to learn Hilchos Shabbos. We're learning this very interesting Siman Shin Daled Mem, because we don't want to say the word that would be spelled Shin Mem Daled. So we're learning the halacha here of either somebody who's traveling, or like the Mishnah Berurah brought up, it could be somebody who is being held captive, which is something that unfortunately we know too much about nowadays. So somebody's held captive deep in tunnels under Gaza by Rishon Roitzchim Yamach Shemam V'Zichram, and he loses track of time, and he doesn't know what day of the week it is. Now he has a huge problem. He doesn't know when Shabbos is. What is he supposed to do? So the Mechaber told us a very interesting halacha. The Mechaber told us that what he needs to do is, he needs to count 7 days, beginning with the day that he first realized, hey, I have a problem. I don't know what day of the week it is. What am I going to do about Shabbos? That becomes day 1. And now he counts 7 days. Day 7, he is going to be Mekadesh as Shabbos. Now note, I didn't say that day 7 is Shabbos, because we don't know what day 7 is. Day 7 could be Tuesday. He doesn't know what day it is, right? And you can't just arbitrarily create Shabbos. Shabbos, the Rebbeinu Shalom was Mekadesh Shabbos. The Kedusha Shabbos is up to the Rebbeinu Shalom. It's not up to some arbitrary decision. We're going to decide that today is Shabbos. I'm sorry, you don't have that option. So it's not that day 7 is Shabbos. It's that he is going to be Mekadesh day 7 as Shabbos. And like we saw in the Mishnah Berurah, we saw in the Mechaber, the Mechaber said, what does that mean? He's going to be Mekadesh day 7 as Shabbos? Well, he's going to make Kiddush. If he has Yayin, he'll make Kiddush ala Yayin. If he has Pas, he'll make Kiddush ala Pas. But he's going to make Kiddush. And at the end of this day that he's being Mekadesh as Shabbos, he's going to make Havdalah. He's going to be Mavdil. And he's going to do it with the brachas, with the shame, and everything else. Well, these, even though there's a Chiv Kiddush that's a Daraisa, right? There's a Chiv of Havdalah, which is Daraisa. But still, the Chachamim said that we're going to be geyser, that you're going to make Epis Shabbos, you're going to be Mekadesh a certain day as Shabbos, complete with Kiddush, with Havdalah, and you're going to daven the Shabbos tefillos. And why? Said the Mishnah Berurah. The Mishnah Berurah said, "V'tiknu chachamim zeh." The chachamim were masakin that you should be mekadosh this day of Shabbos lizikaron shaloi tishtakach Torah Shabbos bimenu. Chas v'chalila, a person shouldn't forget about Shabbos. If a person is going to go for a long time, unfortunately, it could be. Let's say somebody's being held captive for 2 years, right? So he should go 2 years without any Shabbos, and then he's going to come back to civilization, Baruch Hashem, and now he's going to have to start keeping Shabbos again. Shabbos is going to be strange. Can't do that. A Yid can't go without Shabbos. So the Chachamim were masakin. You don't know when Shabbos is. You're going to be mekadosh a day as Shabbos. Okay. Now, we saw that in the previous year. Now what we have to start delving into is, how about malacha? What do we do as far as the Isser malacha? He doesn't know when Shabbos is. So how do you handle the fact that you don't know when Shabbos is as far as Isser malacha? Are you allowed to do malacha? Are you not allowed to do malacha? Every day is a suffix. Maybe it's Shabbos. And high level, you would look at this as being a suffix daraisa. Right? Right now, I want to do malacha. I want to make a fire. I want to warm up. I'm out in the midbar. I want to warm up some water. I want to make a fire. Well, fire is havara. It's an av malacha. It's an issa daraisa. And I don't know. Maybe today is Shabbos. Suffix daraisa. We know the rule. Suffix daraisa l'chumra. So how do we handle the question of malacha? How do we handle the question of malacha when it comes to malacha daraisa? How do we handle the question of malacha when it comes to the question of malacha darabanan? Right? Not everything you do on Shabbos is going to be an isser daraisa. It could be an isser darabanan. Are you allowed to do isser daraisa? Are you allowed to do isser darabanan? So that's really going to be the topic, more or less, of today's shir. Let's take a look at what the Mechaber says. Says the Mechaber, we are 2 lines off the bottom of Kuf Tzadik Daled Amud Beis, right by the Ois Katan Daled for the Mishnah Berurah, in the middle of the line. Says the Mechaber, V'em yesh lo mimale hisparnes. Let's say this person is out in the midbar, he's traveling with a caravan. Again, he has a suffix. Maybe today is Shabbos. Right now, he has the resources that he needs to sustain himself. He's got even basic food, but he has basic food. He has basic drink. So right now, he's okay. There is no pressing need for him to do malacha. There certainly is no pikuach nefesh requirement for him to do malacha. He's okay. He could sit all day long. He has something to eat. He has something to drink. He's not in pikuach nefesh danger that would require him to do malacha. So it says the Mechaber, V'em yesh lo mimale hisparnes, Aser loy lasos malacha klal. He's not allowed to do any malacha whatsoever until his resources run out. So again, he's in the midbar. He doesn't know what day of the week it is. It's a suffix. It might be Shabbos. He wants to do malacha. Well, do you need to do malacha? Do you have a tzarich pikuach nefesh? You're telling me that you're out of food, so you have no choice. You have to go get yourself some food. Maybe you have to pick berries, right? Koitzer. Maybe you have to make a fire because it's going to be 10 below, and kas v'chalila, you'll die, you'll freeze. So you have to make a fire. So okay, it's like any other time that you have a tzarich pikuach nefesh. Pikuach nefesh, even suffix pikuach nefesh, you're allowed to be machal Shabbos. But like the Mechaber says, im yesh lo mimale hisparnes, if he's okay and he doesn't have any dire need to do malacha, also lo lasis malacha klal, he can't do any malacha ad sheyichla ma sheyesh lo, until his resources run dry. Now you don't have food. Now, okay, you need food. Now it doesn't mean that your food ran out and, well, now I could go for a while without food. No, because now already you're getting into suffix pikuach nefesh. You don't know how long it's going to take you to find food. You don't know how long it's going to take you to prepare the food if it needs preparation. So when you run out of resources, now you could do malacha because now it's pikuach nefesh. But until then, you cannot do malacha. Says the Mechaber weiter, ve'oz, when you do run out of resources, then yeyasa malacha b'chol yom, then you could do malacha on any day of the week, afilu b'yom shemekadosh b'y, even the day that you're being mekadosh as Shabbos. Once you run out of resources, and now you're in a pikuach nefesh situation, so now you're allowed to do malacha because you have no choice. Pikuach nefesh. And the day that you are mekadosh as Shabbos is no different than any of the other days. The same way you could be Mechal Shabbos. Every day is a suffix that it might be Shabbos. The day that you arbitrarily chose as Shabbos, your day 7 from when the suffix was Noilad, that's a takana that Chazal made that you should be Mekadosh that day as Shabbos. But there's nothing inherently, halachically different about that day than the others as far as the suffix that it might be Shabbos. So the same way you're allowed to do malacha on the other 6 days, you're allowed to do malacha on that day as well. Now we will see later on in the shir that there may be, according to some achronim, there is one interesting difference when it comes to malacha between the day that you're Mekadosh Shabbos and the other days. But right now, in the context of the halacha that the Mechaber is saying, are you allowed to do malacha? You're living, you don't know when Shabbos is, every day is a suffix Shabbos. Are you allowed to do malacha or not? Right now, what the Mechaber says is really very, very simple, right? It makes perfect sense. Follow the math. It's fundamentally simple, which is, it depends. What is your level of need? You have mal hisparnis by, you have what you need. Well, then there's no pikuach nefesh need to be Mechal Shabbos. You can't be Mechal Shabbos misafik. If, however, you're in a pikuach nefesh situation because your resources ran dry, well, okay, pikuach nefesh, even suffik pikuach nefesh, is doicha Shabbos. Then you could do what you got to do. But, says the Mechaber, realize you could do malacha kidei parnasasai, you could do the malacha that you need to do in order to sustain yourself, but it has to be mitzumtzemes. You're going to have to be mitzamtzim the malacha that you're going to do. You really have to pay attention. So if you're going to go out into the forest and you're going to pick berries, it's not that you're going to go into the forest and pick as many berries as you want. You're going to have to keep a cheshbon. Okay, what do I need? I could do malacha in order to sustain myself, so I shouldn't come to pikuach nefesh. But more than that, I don't have a heter to do. Okay, let's see some Mishnah Berurahs here. Going back to Kuf Tzadik Daled Amud Beis, 1, 2, 3, 4. In my print, it's 4 lines off the bottom in the Mishnah Berurah. Mishnah Berurah is cut in Daled, says the Chavetz Chaim. V'em yesh loi, hainu afilu ein loi kiyam lechem ba'alma. When the Mechaber said that if you have mimale hisparnes, if you have the resources you need to sustain yourself, you're not allowed to do malacha. That means whatever you have, kiyam lechem ba'alma, even if all you have is some bread. You have a box of melba toast. So, okay, that could hold you. There's no pikuach nefesh. Shuv also lasis malacha eitzel b'nei shayara. You're not allowed to go do malacha together with the other people of the caravan, lehistaker, in order to make money, b'shvil tavshil. In other words, you're traveling with a caravan. So it could be the b'nei shayara will tell you, everybody's pitching in, everybody's helping out, everybody's doing malacha, and by doing malacha, you earn your keep. So they'll tell you, listen, we got some hot soup over here, assuming it's kosher. We have some hot soup over here, do some halacha, we'll give you some hot soup. Well, you got a box of crackers, you have something to keep yourself going, you're not allowed to do any malacha because there's no pikuach nefesh. Ta'aloi ein kan pikuach nefesh. Really fundamentally simple. If there's no pikuach nefesh, you can't be Mechal Shabbos misafik. Ois kat hey, mimal hisparnes. The Mechaber used this word if you have resources to sustain yourself. Explains the Mishnah Berurah, Dahainu mikaspoi sheyesh loi. In other words, maybe you don't have food. The B'nai Shayara, you're traveling with a caravan, they've got a wagon, they've got a dining cabin. So they've got the canteen. They've got a place where they have food. You have mimale isparnis, Dahainu mikaspoi sheyesh loi. You have money with which you can get food. So, okay, buying food, mekachu memkar, is a drabanan. Okay, but you could buy food. Oisha yuchal limkar ezechefetz, or maybe you got a watch that you could barter, with somebody in the shayara to give you food, so you should be able to sustain yourself, and you could avoid doing malacha. Oisha yuchal hasik ba'kafa mi b'nei shayara, or maybe the b'nei shayara will extend credit to you. So, again, if you have a way to get food without doing malacha, so listen, tell them, I got a problem. I can't do any work. I can't do any labor. It's my Sabbath. But when we arrive to our destination, I'll pay you back. So give me food on credit. Until we get back to civilization. Or maybe they'll give you a matana. I think this Mishnah Berurah, Ois Kat Nehei, the Chavetz Chaim is just struggling in order to explain the lashon of the Mechaber. It's a unique lashon of the Mechaber. The Mechaber didn't say, im yesh loy ma lechol. if you have what to eat, so then you can't do malacha. Im yesh lo mimale hisparnes, if you could sustain yourself, solution of parnasa. Parnasa, okay, it means you have money, so you can buy food. You have a watch, you could barter for food. They're willing to extend you credit. Now, all of these do involve Isurei Darabanan, right? But, okay, it's Isurei Darabanan, it's not Isurei Daraisa. So, okay, do what you got to do in order to sustain yourself, but malacha you can't do because there's no pikuach nefesh going on over here. Ois katan vav, aser loy, you're not allowed to do malacha. Ritzana loymar, afilu b'chol sheishes hayamim. Don't make a mistake, says the Mishnah Berurah. When we're saying over here that it's aser to do malacha if you have the means to sustain yourself, it's not going back on the beginning of Sif Aleph. It's not saying, oh, you're Mekadesh one day as sort of a pseudo Shabbos, and on that day it's aser to do malacha if you have the resources to sustain yourself. No, this goes on all the days of the week. As long as you have resources to sustain yourself, you're not allowed to do malach on any of the days of the week, because every single one of those days is a suffix that it might be Shabbos. The Kol Yom Hu suffix Shabbos. Va'afal Gavna, here the Mishnah Berurah makes a very interesting point, and it's really a very lamdisha point. Says the Chavetz Chaim, Va'afal Gav deroiv hayamim hu yemei chol. Says the Mishnah Berurah, wait a second, why don't we apply roiv? You're out in the midbar. You have a suffix if today is Shabbos or today's Tuesday. Or it might be Sunday, or it might be Monday, or it might be Wednesday, or it might be Thursday. Whatever other day it is other than Shabbos is mutter b'asiyas malacha. So why don't we apply Rav? I have a suffix. We know that halachically, right, one of the most powerful ways to decide a suffix is to apply Rav. Well, Rav days are mutter ba'asiyas malacha. There's only 1 out of 7 that's aser ba'asiyas malacha. So why don't I just apply Rav? I could do malacha today because al pi Rav, it is not Shabbos. I don't know if it's Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, or Friday, right? But al pi Rav, it's not Shabbos. So l'chayr it should be mutter ba'asiyas malacha. Bam kasha, right? So says the Chavetz Chaim, v'avagav de Rav yamim hu yemei chol. Even though l'chayr you have a Rav over here that's telling you that it's a weekday, so you can make a very strong argument that it should be mutter b'asiyas malacha, says the Mishnah Berurah, and for those who are learning Daf Yomi, this is particularly beautiful, because Daf Yomi is holding in middle of Kol HaZvachim, which in the yeshivish world for sure, they call the Perek Kol HaZvachim Perek HaTaruvos, the Perek of mixtures. The whole Perek of Kol HaZvachim is dealing with mixtures of kachim with chulin, of mixtures of different types of kachim, mixtures of kachim ksherim and kachim pesulim, and we're constantly dealing with roiv and other ways of deciding a suffix. So this comes up very much in Kol HaZvachim. Says the Mishnah Berurah, you cannot apply roiv here. You know why? Because zeh mikri kavua. Over here, Shabbos, which is the miut element in our taruvis, it's the minority element in our taruvis. It's one day where that's aser ba'asiyas malacha, mixed into 6 other days that are mutter ba'asiyas malacha, right? That Shabbos day that you want to try to use bittul b'roiv, right? You want to say, go basa roiv. That day, you cannot say bittul on. You can't use roiv to overwhelm it. Why? Because zemikri kavua. Because Shabbos is called kavua, which means high level. It's something which is fixed in place. The hayom Shabbos min karla koilhu. Because the whole world knows what day Shabbos is. You're stuck in a situation when you don't recognize Shabbos. But the whole rest of the world recognizes which day of Shabbos. Therefore, Shabbos is called kavua. Now, in the context of our share here, I can't give a lengthy dissertation on exactly what kavua means, but we'll give you very high level, the classic example of the question of kavua. So, somebody is in a town. Somebody's on the main drag of a town. And on the main drag of the town, there are 10 butcher stores. Okay, the 10 butcher stores, 6 of them are glatt kosher. 6 of them sell kosher meat. 4 of them sell treifa meat. Maybe they're not Jewish stores. Okay, you're walking on the street and you find a beautiful inch and a half tomahawk steak, if that tickles your fancy. And you find this beautiful Prime Plus piece of meat, and it's not marked. I don't know. It's totally unmarked. We don't know which store it came from. So don't try this at home, but I'm just talking high level here in the halachas of bittul, the halachas of roiv. You found this piece of meat, so now we could apply roiv. Al pi roiv, we don't know which store it came from. It came from one of these stores, but we don't know which store that it came. We don't know which store it came from. Did it come from one of the treifa stores, or did it come from one of the kosher stores? So roiv will tell us, well, it came from one of the stores. 6 of them are kosher, 4 of them are treif. So al pi roiv, it came from one of the kosher stores. That would be a valid application of roiv. We have a piece of meat that was pirish. It was separated from where it originated from. It originated in one of the butcher shops, but it was taken out of the butcher shops. Now it's out in the street, right? We don't know which one it came from. We could apply roiv, and we could say that it came from the roiv. And we could say it came from the roiv kosher butcher stores. That's case number 1, where we have a valid application of roiv to arbitrate a suffix. Now let's change the case. You went shopping. You asked somebody, where can I get a nice steak? Tonight's my anniversary, or I'm making a siyum. Where can I get a beautiful steak? And they said, oh, go out on the main drag. There's kosher butcher stores on the main drag. Okay, you don't know the town. You went out onto the main drag. You saw a butcher store. You went in. You bought a steak. Okay, you come home. Somebody asks you, where did you buy that steak? Which store did you buy the steak from? Oh, I don't know. I don't know. What was the name of the store? I don't know. Where was it on the street? I don't know. I'm not from here. I don't know the Geggins well enough. I don't know the streets. I can't tell you which one I bought it from. Wait a second. Do you know that there's a treifa butcher store there? On that street, on that main drag where you went, there's a treifa butcher store. Now, you're telling me you don't know which store you bought the steak from. If you don't know which store you bought the steak from, maybe you bought the steak from the treifa store. It doesn't have a hashgacha on it. It doesn't have a label on it. It doesn't have anything. You don't know which store you bought it from. If you don't know which store you bought it from, maybe you walked into the treifa store. Maybe you picked up a treifa steak. You went to the register. You bought a treifa steak and you brought it home. How do I know? Now, you might be tempted to apply roiv, right? You'll apply the same roiv. You'll say, well, there are 6 kosher stores. There's 4 treifa stores. Why did we say roiv? Pashtus, I must have gone into the majority. I went into one of the majority kosher stores. Why should I say that I went into the treifa store? So apply roiv. The Gemara says over here you cannot apply roiv. Why? Because this is a case of kavua. What does that mean, kavua? Over here, where was the suffix noilid? Where did this suffix first manifest itself? Where did it first become negeya? I don't mean when did you realize the suffix. You realized the suffix at home, in your kitchen. But the suffix began when you picked up the steak. You don't know where you picked the steak up from. You might have picked it up in a treifa store. The treifa store, the piece of meat in the treifa store, is called kavua. It is fixed in place. It is in its place. Now, the truth is, mathematically, right, the odds are even that you went into any of the stores, right? You went into one store. The odds are exactly equal. The odds that you went into Mordechai's butcher shop or Tony's butcher shop are exactly even. They're 1 out of 10, right? So since it's kavua, Chazal say kemechzal mechzadami. Kol kavua kemechzal mechzadami. Whenever you're dealing with a suffix which is a kavua, we don't look at it as a roiv and a miyut. We look at it as kavua. We look at it as you cannot apply roiv because the suffix was noilad where the steak was fixed in place in its treifa store. In the first case, where was the suffix noilad? It was noilad out in the street. Out in the street, the piece of meat was already separated from the stores. Once it was already separated from the stores, I have a right to say, al pi roiv, it came from one of the roiv kosher stores. But when it was in its place in its store. You just have a chesaron yediyah. You don't know which store you went into, then we cannot apply roiv. Says the Chavetz Chaim, that's the same thing over here. Over here, when you have a suffix, I don't know if today is Shabbos or today is Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Shabbos is kavua. Everybody in the world recognizes the days of the week. They're all walking around with phones with calendars on them. They all have clocks that say the date. Everybody knows, even if they don't know if it's the 27th or the 28th of the month, they know what day of the week it is. I can only remember one time that I was in Shul davening Shacharis, and it was Tuesday, which is the shortest Yom, and the Shatz is taking a very long time to say the Yom, and then we realized he's saying Wednesday's Yom, which is the longest Yom, and he thought it was Wednesday. By and large, everybody knows what day of the week it is. You have a chesaron yediyah, you don't know what day of the week it is. Says the Chavetz Chaim, Shabbos is kavua. Shabbos is kavua b'mkaimai, and therefore we cannot apply roiv. Okay, let's go weiter. Mishnah Berurah is cutting zayin. Kedei parnasasai mitzum tzemes. So, if you're already in a pikuach nefesh situation, because your resources ran dry, and you don't have a watch to barter, and you don't have money to buy food with, and the Bnei Shayara are not willing to extend you credit, now you got a problem. Now you have a pikuach nefesh problem. So now you're allowed to do malacha. But how much malacha are you allowed to do? Parnasasai mitzum tzemes. You could do exactly what you need. Says the Mishnah Berurah, this heter, that you're allowed to do malacha, and the isser, that you're only allowed to do mitzum tzemes, akol yom namikoi. This is also going on all the days of the week. She'ena rashay lehistaker b'malacha yoser. You're not allowed to do any extra work on any of those days. Va'afilu b'yom hashishi shaloi. Remember, you're keeping one day as a derabanan Shabbos. You're keeping one day, I hate to use this phrase, but it's really the phrase that hits it on the nail. You're keeping one day as sort of a pseudo Shabbos so that you shouldn't forget Shabbos. So you might be tempted. Tomorrow is the day that I'm going to be Mekadesh as Shabbos. So let me do some extra malacha today, which, according to my cheshbon, is Yom Shishi. According to my cheshbon, it's Friday. So let me do a little extra malacha today, right? Let me do a little extra work. We should talk about Shabbos, Yochel Shabbos. Let me do a little extra work today, so that I shouldn't have to do any work tomorrow, which is the day that I'm going to make Kiddush, and I'm going to daven a Shabbos davening, and everything else. Says the Mishnah Berurah, no. Even on that day, you can't do any extra malacha. Because remember, that is only a Taganas Chazal, but really, technically, Al Pidin, every single day is exactly the same suffix that it might be Shabbos. Maybe today, the day that you're making Friday, the day that you want to do extra malach on, maybe that day is really Shabbos, and tomorrow's Sunday, or tomorrow's Monday, right? So no, you can't do extra work today. What right do you have to do even a drop of malacha if it's not pikuach nefesh? Aval kidei parnasa mutter. But what you need to sustain yourself is mutter. Shenegel pikuach nefesh. Shem lo yasem malacha yamas b'midbar barav. Yeah, pikuach nefesh, suffik pikuach nefesh. You have a heter to go do malacha. Ubediyeved im hirviach b'yam echad yoser miktei parnasasai. Now, let's say you did malacha one day. You went out and you did malacha one day in order to have food for yourself. And you were supposed to do kedei parnasasai mitzum tzemes, but that's not always easy to cheshbon. And it turns out that you have extra food. So you went out, you picked food for the day, and you have extra. Also, so now the original halacha kicks in, which you have food, you have what to eat, not allowed to do any malacha until that food runs out. Okay, next halacha over here, top line, Kuf Tzadikei and Aleph, says the Mechaber, how about when it comes to traveling? In other words, the basic case, the basic scenario, the name of the Siman over here is Din HaHolich B'Midbar. So you're traveling with a caravan in the Midbar. Now, you don't know what day of the week it is. The caravan's not stopping. The caravan is traveling, right? Now, whatever day was Erev Shabbos, during Bein Hashmashos going into Shabbos, you were kind of Shvisa, right? It's kedai to keep on talking about this because we're going into Chelik Dalet. You were kind of Shvisa, you established your place for Shabbos when Shabbos kicked in at Bein Hashmashos, and now you have a tchum of 2,000 amos. But every day the caravan is going to travel, and hopefully they're going to travel more than 2,000 amos in a day. So every day you have a problem because every day you're traveling with the caravan and you're going out of your tchum. Is that a problem? So what should you do? Are you mechuyev to freeze in place and let the caravan go or count 2,000 amos and then stop and then freeze and then let them leave you in the dust? Literally, says the Mechaber. No, absolutely not. You're allowed to travel every single day, and the Mishnah Berurah will say you can travel as far as you need to, even on the day that you are Mekadesh as Shabbos. Now, I just want to point out that those 4 words here at the end, seem to be extra. Why are they extra? Because the Mechaber just finished telling me a halacha, that when it comes to Pekuach Nefesh, you're allowed to do malacha every single day, even on the day that you're keeping as Shabbos, right? Because Pekuach Nefesh. Now he tells me another halacha. He tells me the halacha of Tchum. And he tells me, yeah, you can keep on traveling. Don't worry, keep on traveling. And you can travel every single day, even on the day that you're keeping as Shabbos. Well, you just told me that when I'm allowed to do malacha, I'm allowed to do malacha even on the day that is my Shabbos. So traveling out of the Tchum, l'chari, you're also allowed to do. Not only that, Pashtus, traveling out of the Tchum is even more kal, because traveling out of the Tchum, according to most, is an Issa D'Rabbanan. It's not an Issa D'Oraisa. So if you're telling me that when I don't have Kedei L'Hispines, I'm allowed to do malacha, and then I'm allowed to do malacha D'Oraisa, and I'm allowed to do malacha D'Oraisa even on the day that I'm keeping a Shabbos, why do you have to tell me that I'm also allowed to travel, and I'm even allowed to travel on the day that I'm keeping a Shabbos? Let's take a look here at the Mishnah Berurah. Says the Mishnah Berurah, you're allowed to travel. Says the Mishnah Berurah, not only are you allowed to travel, and not only are you allowed to travel out of your tchum, afilu kama parsois, you're allowed to travel very far. How much is the tchum? 2,000 amos. That's kedei hiluch mil. So that's 2,000 amos is the tchum. Parsa is 8,000 amos. So a parsa is 4 mil. That's 8,000 amos. Now, if you go more than 12,000 amos, now already, according to some, tchumin are a daraisa. The Mishnah Berurah is telling you here, you're allowed to travel many parsois. Now, if you go 3 parsois, you're already at 24,000 amos. But it doesn't matter. So even though, according to some, the tchum of 12 is already this is daraisa, over here says the Mishnah Berurah you can travel even kama parsois. Why? Very interesting. Shem yishar b'midbar la'olam yechal Shabbos v'yomotz be'eretz gzeira. Now, what's interesting to me about this line in the Mishnah Berurah is that the Mishnah Berurah over here seems to be making 2 points. I know I wrote myself a note about this. Yeah. Okay. The Mishnah Berurah seems to be making 2 points over here in this short little Mishnah Berurah. He's telling you you're allowed to travel kama parsois. Why? For 2 reasons. One reason is a very interesting cheshbon. What are we going to tell you? You can't travel? Well, if we tell you you can't travel, then what we're doing is we're putting you in a situation where you're going to have to be Mechal Shabbos forever, right? Because you can't get out of the midbar, right? In the midbar, you have a problem. You have to keep on doing malacha because of a heter of pekuach nefesh. And you can't keep Shabbos. You don't know what day Shabbos is. You don't know what you're doing. So what should we do? Because of Hilchah Shabbos, we should lock you into that situation forever? And we should say, sorry, Charlie, you're stuck in the midbar? Doesn't make sense. Get out of the midbar. Get out of the midbar. Now you'll be able to keep Shabbos, right, in a normal way. Now, we find a similar cheshbon in the Gemara, where the Gemara says, the heter of doing pekuach nefesh. Why are you allowed to be mechal Shabbos for pekuach nefesh to save somebody? Well, part of the cheshbon is, interestingly enough, if you do malacha once to save somebody, pekuach nefesh, now he's going to be able to keep, hopefully he'll live a long life. You save a guy when he's 20 and he lives till 90, right? So now he had another 70 years of Shmirah Shabbos. So you're Machal Shabbos once to save somebody for Shmirah Shabbos for 70 years. So there's a little bit of that cheshbon over here also, which is, listen, we got to get you out of the midbar. Now, okay, we're going to let you travel through the midbar in order to get out of the midbar so that you should be able to keep Shabbos properly like a mensch. Also, the second point is, there's another problem. And that is that if we keep you in the midbar, it's very nice that we're telling you that you're allowed to do malacha for Pekuach Nefesh. But that just means that we're constantly putting you in a situation of Pekuach Nefesh, right? You go, you pick berries, you eat the berries, you run out of berries, you got to pick more berries, then you run out of berries, you got to pick more berries, and you're constantly living in this situation of Safek Pekuach Nefesh. Safek Pekuach Nefesh generally, eventually catches up with a person, all right? And then the gig is up, and then he dies. So it says the Mishnah Berurah, there's an element of Pekuach Nefesh here in allowing him to travel, which is V'yamot Speretz Gzera. If we doom him to remain in the midbar, this is not going to end well. So, Lamaisa, there is always an aspect of Pekuach Nefesh to get the guy out of the midbar. Okay. Ice cut and test. The Mechaber said he's allowed to travel afilu b'yom shemekadosh by, even on the day that he's keeping a Shabbos, kidei lemar lotzeis min hamidbar. Again, we're going to allow you to travel because we got to get you out of the midbar. Now, here's where the Mishnah Berurah makes an interesting point. Aval sha'arei isurim, but other isurei Shabbos, afilu eino rak shvus derabanan, even only isurei derabanan, asur lasois b'yom hashvi shaloi, he's not allowed to do on the day that he's keeping a Shabbos. So this really is the first time that we see that there is a difference when it comes to doing malacha on the day that you're keeping a Shabbos and the other days, right? Like this we said, you're not allowed to do malacha on any day, unless it's Pekuach Nefesh, right? And that goes for the day that you're keeping a Shabbos too. If it's Pekuach Nefesh, you could do malacha. If it's not Pekuach Nefesh, you can't do malacha. So is there any difference between the day that you're keeping a Shabbos and the other days when it comes to malacha? We haven't seen that. Now we see it. How do we see it? Because the Mechaber said, you're allowed to travel on every day, even the day that you keep a Shabbos. What's the even? The even is because there is a difference between that day and the other days, which is that on the day that you're keeping a Shabbos, says the Magen Avram, you even have to keep Isurei D'Rabbanan. The rest of the days, we don't tell you that you have to keep Isurei D'Rabbanan, which, incidentally, we saw earlier in the Mishnah Berurah. Because the Mechaber's lashon was that if you have kidei lehisparnes, you can't do malacha. Said the Mishnah Berurah, what is that funny lashon, kidei lehisparnes? Oh, you could buy food. Buy food? It's a d'Rabbanan. Yeah, you could buy food. Barter for your watch. It's a d'Rabbanan. Mekachumemkar. All of these things are Isurei D'Rabbanan. Says the Magen Avram, Isurei D'Rabbanan are mutter for this guy on all of the other days of the week. Why? The math is really very simple. Safek D'Rabbanan lekula. I want to do Mekach Umemkar today, but I have a Safek, it might be Shabbos. Okay, it's a Safek D'Rabbanan. Safek D'Rabbanan lekula. Issa D'Raisa, Safek D'Raisa lechumra. Issa D'Rabbanan, Safek D'Rabbanan lekula. But on the day that you're keeping as Shabbos, over there we have a chumrah, which is that on that day we tell you to refrain even from Isurei D'Rabbanan. But not when it comes to traveling. When it comes to traveling, travel. You got to travel because we got to get you out in the midbar. So go ahead, travel. We can't have you stuck in the midbar. Okay. Ubel Yerabba mekel b'shvos afilu b'yam hashvi shaloi came to do rak tzveika d'Rabbanan. The El Yerabba applies the math very strictly. The El Yerabba says no. Even on the day that you're keeping a Shabbos, it's still Safek D'Rabbanan lekula. You're allowed to do Isurei D'Rabbanan. Okay, let's move along here and let's finish the Siman. Let's do Sif Beis, says the Mechaber. This is a very interesting Sif. Again, this guy is traveling and he lost track of the days of the week. But you know what he knows? He knows I left home 4 days ago. So the guy wakes up in the morning, he puts on his tefillin, he starts davening, he gets up to the Yom, he looks at the page blankly, and he says, oh my goodness, I have no idea what day of the week it is. So he starts to rebuild in his mind. And he says, well, I've been traveling for 4 days. So that means I left after breakfast 4 days ago. So I know how many days ago I left. But for the life of me, I can't remember what day of the week it was when I left. But I know it's 4 days since I left. Says the Mechaber, that already helps you. Says the Mechaber, if you know how many days it is since you left, he knows today is 4, or he knows today is day 5 since I left. But I don't know what day of the week I left. Oh, this is a gewaldige help, says the Mechaber. Mutter lasis belacha kol ma sheyirtze b'yom shmini liyitziyasai. On day 8 of the day, counting from the day that he left, he could do malacha. She b'yom kazeh yatsa mibeisai. Because he knows that 8 days previously, he was traveling. The bavada lo yatsa b'Shabbos, he didn't travel on Shabbos. So again, the guy knows I left 4 days ago. Okay, so let's count, right? I left 4 days ago. We're going to call that day 1. Day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4, day 5, day 6, day 7, day 8. Let's give them names, right? I didn't leave on a Shabbos. So let's say I left on a Sunday, right? Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Shabbos, Sunday. Day 8, if I left on Sunday, day 8 is a Sunday. I know I didn't leave on Shabbos, right? Because I'm not allowed to travel on Shabbos. So I definitely didn't leave home on Shabbos. So I left home one of the other days of the week. Well, if I count 8 days from the day that I left, it's always going to be a weekday. So says the Mechaber, if you know how many days it is since you left home, that allows you to establish one of the days that are 100% mutter b'malacha. And like the Mechaber says, and you can keep that count going. You could do malacha on day 8, right? The bavada lo yatsa b'Shabbos, v'chein b'yom chamisha asar, and on day 15, u'b'yom esr v'shtayim, and on day 22, v'chein la'olam, right? You have now established one day that is 100% bona fide a weekday, because you know it's multiples of 8 since you left home, and you know you didn't leave home on Shabbos because you're not allowed to travel on Shabbos. So that gives you a gewaltige zach. Now you have one day. You could build a fire, you could do your laundry, you could go out hunting, you could go pick berries for the whole week, right? Now you got one day, you could do as much malacha as you want, 100% mutter. Says the Mishnah Berurah, cut yod bezi yom yatsa, v'alkein also lasis tekef malacha, the shema yatsa b'yom shlishi u'revi v'hayom yom Shabbos, v'chein b'yom shishi u'shvi, the shema yatsa b'yom rishon v'sheni. So, when you realize this, when you realize that, oh, I've been traveling for 4 days, right? All that tells you is that you left on a weekday. So right now you can't do malacha because you still don't know which day of the week you left. Maybe it was Tuesday. So Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Shabbos. If you know, I've been traveling for 5 days, but I don't know which day I left. Maybe you left on Tuesday and today is Shabbos. So right now you can't do malacha. But on day 8, you could do malacha. B'yom shmini l'siyasai. Avol yom b'yom tishi aser. But on day 9, again, you know I've been traveling for X amount of days. Day 8, you can do as much malacha as you want. Day 9, you can't. Now, points out to Mishnah Berurah, you might have a svara in your mind that you should be allowed to do malacha on day 9. What would that be? The hagam dein derech lotzis mibeisai be'erev Shabbos. Day 9 means that in order for it to be usher, you would have left your house on Erev Shabbos. Who leaves to travel on a long trip on Erev Shabbos? But still, maybe you did. Dilma Mikul Alei Shayara, maybe you checked the caravan schedule online, and the camel caravan leaves on Erev Shabbos. V'im kein yom chili tziyasi hu Shabbos. Avol b'yom shmini v'chei b'leiloi motor. V'kasar achreinim, the achreinim right. Dem yachal asis balacha b'yisa yom shiyaspek lo l'hispanis v'zeh kol ha-shavua, az alasis balacha kol ha-shavua. Now that you've established one day where it's 100% mutter for you to do as much malacha as you want, well, take advantage of it. Try to do as much malacha on that day to give you what you need for the entire week, so you shouldn't have to do malacha any other of the days of the week because you're coming on to a heter of pikuach nefesh. Okay? We're going to stop over here, and Mir Hashem, the next shir is going to be the final shir in Chelik Gimel. Okay, thanks so much for joining me for limud HaTorah. Discussing limud HaTorah should be made against Klal Yisrael. The Rebbeinu Shalom should send Yeshua for us Parnas and Shaduchim Tolos in need. We should be zeicher to see the Bias Kal Tzedek. B'meher v'yameinu Amen. Be well.